Flex Your Hustle here again, and it's Podinar time. Today, achieving scalable results through personalised deals in affiliate marketing. Now, I know that sounds like it'll be right up a lot of your alleys. Our expert is from RevLifter, and he's talking to Amanda Corkins from Commission Factory. Let's get into it.
Today's webinar is on achieving scalable deals personalization and affiliate marketing, where we have partnered with RevLifter to discuss a look at the rise and importance of personalized deal content in real time. Today, we'll be chatting over balancing retailer objectives with specific consumer behavior patterns. This will help brands ensure that goals are achieved while also giving consumers what they ultimately want, which is the best deal in the market.
So first of all, thank you to everybody that's joined today. Today, I'm going to be talking about achieving scalable deals, personalization and affiliate marketing. And I'm going to do that from an affiliate angle. But I also want to keep in mind that, of course, everything I'm talking about really is affluent across affiliate marketing in general, across e-commerce in general. So what we're going to talk about today, I just really want to first of all define what we believe personalization is against what actually I think the market probably thinks it is. Then I'm going to talk a bit about customer expectations. So what's the data value exchange? And we're living in a post-GDPR world now. I want to talk a bit about what this new world order really looks like. And then also personalization in practice. How do we actually practically understand how advertisers are currently using personalization? Then also just case studies that we've got, just to talk about how we believe that personalization is developing and how we're pushing the boundaries within that sector. Then I'm going to talk a bit about what a success formula looks like. We need to understand also how we're proving incrementality. And then I'm going to talk a bit about where I believe the future of personalization is actually heading. So to begin with then, when we talk about personalization, Google says at least that the action of designing or producing something to meet someone's individual requirements. Now, when we look at personalization from that angle, it actually talks about it being an individualistic thing. But actually, we believe there are two parts to this equation. So what we say at RevLifter is personalization is the process of creating one-to-one experiences for customers, presenting consumers with unique deals, which are specifically tailored to their needs and desires, all based on the retailer's goals. Now, what do I mean by that? What I'm saying is actually, we believe that personalization has to start with the advertiser, because we need to understand what your objectives are initially, because we can't really start to actually then present personalized offers to the consumer until we know what you're actually trying to achieve. And what I mean by that is understanding things like not giving discounts unless we know what the margin is on the product, not being detrimental to the brand equity, for example. And then understanding also how do we change consumer behavior to benefit you, the advertiser, as well as also what the consumer ultimately wants, which is the personalized deal. So we think about it very differently. We don't believe it's a one-way street. It has to be a two-way street. We believe that there is a real shift in customer expectation. Consumers understand that there is there's a value exchange with their data. They're willing to use it as a commodity in exchange for personalized deals. I'll explain how that actually works in a moment. So to give you some ideas around when we talk about clear value exchange, if you look at brands like Clinique, for example, where they're asking very specific questions to their audiences around the type of skin tone you have, what type of makeup you're actually looking for, and actually ascertaining what type of foundation ultimately is right for you. Coming back with the ability to, once there's been a clear value exchange and the consumer's given up some of their personal preferences, they're able to then to retarget and remarket to those consumers. Now, not all advertisers are doing it, but I would say that's the benchmark. It's the bare minimum that we should start thinking about doing within the affiliate channel. And consumers are expecting to be asked those types of questions. But then on top of that as well, actually a brand that I recently discovered through this journey of understanding how personalization really works is Thread. Now, Thread actually ask a series of questions, at least 20 to 30 before you can even shop. Now, I don't know any brands really that are able to actually ascertain that much information before consumers really willing to give up and shop. But the experience for me was I looked at illustrative ideas of types of clothing that I'd like to buy. And at the end of it, you actually get allocated a personal shopper, a personal assistant who actually is a stylist for you. Even though it's an automated email that gets thrown out, you're actually able to contact them directly. With everything, there needs to be some kind of threshold of spend. So for example, here, saying if you spend £50, you'll get a £15 gift card. And ultimately what we're doing is we're also setting a threshold of an average order value for the type of customer that we're trying to actually capture as well. But however, I think the market has moved on significantly from that. But when we talk to our customers here at RevLifter, we actually asked retailers why they wanted personalization. Now, unsurprisingly, of course, most of them said, oh, more average order values, increasing conversion rates. And that's what you would expect, especially from the affiliate channel being sort of towards the bottom of the funnel in the sense that it's a conversion channel. However, what we started to actually get from advertisers when we delved a little bit deeper was they wanted brand loyalty. They want customers to come back and shop with them. They want to really understand who their customers are and actually have a rapport with them, actually have a dialogue. And I think the industry is really moving on because we have a significant amount of data, which if you go back 5 years ago, we really struggled to process. Especially when I was client side, one thing that I really struggled with were the different systems that we had in-house. We really struggled with the amount of data that we were capturing, what to do with that data. We're in a position now where we can actually skim the top of it and really understand and ascertain what type of consumers we're actually bringing to our sites. So how do we actually go about aligning to the retailer's goals initially? Here at RevLifter, we believe that we really need to understand exactly what people are putting in their baskets, not just trying to stop them leaving our sites, which is what we've really been worried about for the last 10 years. And that's where technology has been developing. But our customers don't necessarily just want to leave the site and go somewhere else. They're just looking for a good deal. So what we do here is we understand what's in the basket. These retailer data signals allow us to actually then start to capture and market to our consumers in a very unique way. Because if we understand what our basket thresholds are and what people are putting in their actual baskets themselves, we can actually start to skim that data layer and pull it into a feeds engine. Most of our partners will actually scrape a page. We don't believe that that's the right way to go. And what we then to do is we need to execute on the offers using our if and and statements, but ultimately machine learning, which is a buzzword at the moment at RevLifter. We believe that actually machine learning is all about understanding the consumer behavior on site, but also executing on the types of deals that ascertains to what's in their basket. So I'm going to talk a bit about some practical examples in the industry of where I believe they're a good solid industry benchmark, but it's the bare minimum that we should be doing. So I want to start really from the consumer point of view before we flip onto the advertiser point of view. So a really good example of understanding how we segment our customers is Hotels.com. The Hotels.com rewards program allows customers to have different tiers or different levels based upon how many nights they stay. So for every 10 that you stay, you receive one hotel night. Now, what this allows Hotels.com to do is ultimately market to their customers with very particular deals because they know what hotels they're staying in, which is a program that's now been copied throughout the travel industry. However, as a very bare minimum, though, I would say that what hasn't really developed is the ability to target them at a tiered level and actually start to push people into gold and platinum memberships. And we really struggle to manage that because it's very difficult to market to consumers within an industry and make them buy more if you can't understand if they're on a business trip or if they're on a personal leisure trip. So if we look at Booking.com, who are the masters of persuasive nudging, one thing that they do particularly well is understanding the occupancy rates of their hotels. Now, this really is pushing consumers to actually book because the hotel might fill up quickly. What travel brands really want to do is actually push people to hotels where there's low occupancy. What we would do at RevLifter in this instance is use our technology, for example, to actually push people to Hotel B from Hotel A, where there isn't enough people staying, for instance, in the same location, by pushing things like room upgrades, or maybe free bottle of champagne, or a free meal, or maybe some money off, for example. And it's actually difficult to manage those occupancy rates unless you're actually managing your yield and you're using the data. Someone like Misguided, for example, who masters of persuasive nudging from a social proofing point of view. Now, social proofing has been around for what, 7 or 8 years, I'd say, but there's still a lot of brands that aren't doing this as a very minimum. And this is a really good way to create urgency for a lot of the shoppers that are on site. Now, these may seem like obvious things, but like I said, these are very much the benchmark of what we would expect as a consumer these days. The challenge that we're really facing is that consumers are very savvy and they will shop around for the best deal. Often I get questions from advertisers saying, if you're trying to drive consumers back to our site for the best deal, they've learned to go to voucher code sites. Well, actually, that's because they've learned to do that. And it's up to us to make sure that we challenge those consumers and challenge their beliefs and where they can get the best deals from. Because ultimately, as the advertiser, it's our job to market to them from an advertiser point of view. And the way that advertisers actually do this, if you go to Treatwell, which is a brand that actually houses lots of luxury sort of bar treatments, basically. So what they do is they actually try and drive people to their app for the best deal. And the way they do that is they encourage app downloads on the site or via their partners, which is something that a lot of brands do try and do, but not particularly well, in my opinion. They do this because they only offer their best deals via their app. They've trained their consumer to understand that they're going to get deals via their app that way. Hotels.com, Expedia, and a lot of travel brands do very similar things. Very, for example, one of the first brands to really utilize weather actually in-house. Now, they do it at a very medium capacity, but they're probably one of the better brands actually out there that are managing this. Being an online shop, they can drive live weather information based upon if it's raining, they'll push wet weather clothing. If it's sunny, then obviously they'll do the reverse. I think this is really important because we always worry about first-party data, and rightly so we should. But actually, we need to react to the environment around us. And sometimes it's best to override deals based on what's happening with the audience in their vicinity. Lastly, Expedia, so presenting dynamic deals on the margin. The one thing that we really worry about as brands is actually how do we balance margins? So again, within the travel space, flights have a very low yield. They have a low margin. Hotels have a higher yield. So OTAs are always trying to push packages, for example. And similarly for retail brands, trying to make sure you match fast and slow moving products together to try and create urgency for the consumer. But here at RevLifter, we actually see things rather differently. All these things just set a benchmark, but how smart is the data that we're using? Things like social proofing are just showing how many people are looking at a deal. When we're talking to our customers, what we really care about is actually increasing the average order value and increasing conversion, but not just using a median average order value. What we really care about is understanding the tiers of customers that are coming to our site. For instance, with Coast, we used our Stretch to Save technology to actually tier customers who are spending above the £60 threshold. It's about marketing to those consumers to stretch the basket in the correct manner to them, because you're not going to be able to get somebody to jump from £60 or $60 to 200. It's just not going to happen. So we need to make sure that we market people with really pertinent deals to the product that's not only in the basket in real time, but also that has a good yield for the advertiser and pushes them over to the most logical threshold. When we use discount codes, what we often see in the affiliate channel is actually a decrease in average order value. But what we're saying at RevLifter is that actually to use these deals in the correct way and in a really personal manner, we can increase the average order value. We wanted to talk to the customers in a really contextual manner. What do we mean by that? Are they new? Are they returning? It's really important that we make sure that we hit the consumer with the right messaging at the right time. And not just that, but also executing on the right deal. It's really prevalent that consumers that you manage to do that in the right moment don't necessarily leave the site. They stay on and they will actually click and buy from the advertiser. And I think it's understanding that we worry in affiliate marketing that consumers always go to cashback or voucher sites for the best deal. It's not necessarily the case. But also just from an increased revenue point of view as well, understanding smart upsells. The way that we worked with HP, we actually pushed on the basket deals in real time. So we would increase the conversion rate and average order value by pushing the relevant deals to consumers. So to give you an example, if somebody had a small ink cartridge in their basket, we would message the consumer to say, did you know there's a bigger ink cartridge here? It has 1,000 more prints. Would you like to replace the item in your basket, and give them a very small discount? We got a 90% engagement rate because what our technology can do is pull and push things out of the basket. You'll find a lot of technology partners who are starting to creep out the woodwork now. We're able to manage and manipulate what's happening on the basket to make it a fluid experience for the consumer. This really allowed us to actually treble the conversion rate for HP, and it has done for many other brands as well. I just want to talk a bit about success criteria before we move on. But I think it's really important that we understand exactly what your goals are as an advertiser. I've talked about that at the beginning. A lot of affiliates that we talk to obviously try to get as close as they can to the brand, but without understanding what's in the basket data layer and capturing first-party data, it's really quite difficult to do that. But we shouldn't get stuck on first-party data only. We need to understand third-party data as well. Things like AccuWeather, who we partner with, APIing live weather into any deals that you're serving. Just to get stuck on that point really quickly, we actually won an award last year with Vision Direct in the Australian market. And what we were doing was actually serving consumers in real time with the most relevant sunglasses and eye protection. We're hitting people in high UV areas, for example, and actually telling them they have the wrong sunglasses in their basket. And when you're able to help a customer in that way, it doesn't just become a deal experience. It becomes a more personalized experience in the sense that you're helping them find what they really are looking for. From that, you can start to then ascertain insights about your consumer behavior. I talked a bit about how we execute on deals initially using deals engines, and most technology publishers will use static and dynamic deals, which means they're building out very step scenarios. But starting to turn on machine learning, actually understand specific custom behavior is really important. What we're trying to do is create an environment for customers where, as I said at the beginning of my presentation, they feel as though there's a personalized experience with your brand and actually re-engagement because, like I said before, we do live in this post-GDPR world. People do expect personalized deals. And to manage that, we need to really understand what's in their basket, what other customers are buying, and start thinking about consumers not just as a one-time thing. How do we re-engage them from an existing point of view? That actually starts me thinking about how do we prove incrementality. So with incrementality, we think about control groups and test groups. You're probably familiar with working with partners who will say to you, we'll have group A where they don't see any of the technology, and group B who do see personalized technology, let's say on site, or whether it be through a personalized voucher code page. What we really need to understand again is what the advertiser objectives are. And when we start to observe those current behaviors, we really start to understand how we can start testing and learning. Testing and learning doesn't really require A, B, C, D type tests. We should be able to test on a one-to-one basis, because we're taking things from the basket data layer or data layers that are on the basket page. At least we can then start to actually market to people on a one-to-one basis, because ultimately you can't start grouping people demographically like we traditionally have, because people don't necessarily behave like a herd. We believe that we've moved on from the incrementality idea of just creating control groups. Of course, we do have control group A and control group B, because that gives us a really base level of information. Is the technology engaging with the consumer? We talk a bit about freezing the basket before and post interactions. What did the basket physically look like before a consumer actually saw a piece of personalized technology? And what does it look like afterwards? Are we seeing a different pattern across the consumer base? So working with partners like Commission Factory to understand what the impact across the entire channel is. If we're lucky enough to be able to see cross-channel, so all your paid channels, then actually what's the impact across all of those channels? Also, only showing incremental offers. I go back to what I've said 1,000 times in this presentation, but it's really important that we only show incrementality when it suits you, the advertiser, when it's good for you, good for your margin. And also rewarding customer behavior. Ultimately, only giving a deal to a customer when they behave in a certain way to release a deal. We work with brands like Puma, and we'll be launching Nike soon as an example. With those brands, we're talking about showing consumers progress as to how close they are to getting a deal. So you're almost educating the consumer to help them understand how they're going to release a code. Searching on the web isn't always the best way to find a generic code. Finding it at home at the advertiser site is actually the best place for that. So just before I get into personalized deals, I just want to talk a little bit about how we help brands do that here at RevLifter. I didn't want to get into a sales pitch in the beginning, but I think it's important you understand how we execute here in the business. So what we basically do is build native personalized deals pages when we drive consumers back once they've left the basket. What you'll find is a lot of technology partners are now starting to help brands similar to the way that we work, but in different ways on site. I want to talk a bit about how I think that is going to help impact the future of personalized deals moving forward. What we're seeing now is a move towards personalized rewards, and actually managing reward and gift carding in a live environment for consumers. So dynamically changing the margins on the rewards that consumers actually receive. Managing that on the basket would be, for instance, you have a consumer who has a pair of trainers and actually educating them that if they add trainer protection and white socks, you're going to potentially reward them with either a deal or even a dynamic gift card. We all know that Amazon's risen through the ranks over the number of years, and consumers have learned to go there to find pretty much any product that they want. What we're finding is a shift in retail behavior that they're trying to wean themselves off Amazon. I guess the equivalence in most markets would be creating or finding at least deals pages on the advertiser sites. However, most of these pages are static. So where we try and help consumers at RevLifter is by creating these dynamic deals that we're driving people back to once they've left to go to Google to come back on an SEO and PPC basis. We're also seeing a rise in voice searches as well. I saw a stat somewhere that by 2022, 50% of searches will be via voice. We need to start thinking about that. That's massive. Are we moving with the trend? You'll expect Black Friday and also Christmas periods this year, there'll be a lot of people using their Echoes or their Google to search for deals. Also, brand direct to customer. The conversations I'm having on a daily basis with brands is, how do we get customers direct to site? Brands I'm thinking of are Nike, Puma, even HP, for example, a lot of electronic companies trying to move away from relying on resellers. I remember 10 years ago taking co-op funded money and not being able to put the best deal out, even though Intel had paid for a HP campaign because a reseller had a sale on. And now we're moving beyond that world where we're worried about those relationships. Also, use of geolocation. We're pushing people into store. You look across the globe, loads of high street retailers are closing their stores down, moving to online. Some are even going bust or into administration, actually driving footfall in store, but also driving high street traffic to actually shop on their mobile. Offline to online as well. How do we manage that? How do you manage the flow of traffic? Making sure that we actually capture data that wasn't digitized before. A lot of brands now, their technical houses or the technical functionality that they have for storing data is vast. How do you manage that? We're able to skim on the top of the data and actually understand how we manage that because we have partners that can process that data. If you look at partners like Adobe, for example, or the big media houses, and actually here at RevLifter, we're able to pull a lot of not just the basket page information, but also electronic points of sale as well from the advertiser. That gives us a new dynamic on the way that we shop. If you look at brands like, for example, the Iconic within Sydney, for example, delivering goods within the hour and then be able to send it back so you can actually get ready for a party in the evening. There are very few brands that are able to facilitate that, but that's a huge leap forward. Open banking also. So thinking about what is it you're buying with your Visa, actually using that information. I remember 8 or 9 years ago having a meeting with partners like Visa who were trying to understand how we use that information. We're in a world now where we can access that and actually personalize deals to the consumers in real time. At the beginning of my presentation, I talked about consumers will take back control. I still hear people saying, people are worried about the security. They're not willing to give up their data. We need to be really worried. Yes, of course they are. I certainly am. We all worry about that. They also understand in this post-GDPR world that actually their data is a commodity. We should understand that they're expecting personalized deals. Single points of application. So that's basically when we talk about when we have to refresh a deal, we usually have to refresh the whole basket or the page. Here at RevLifter, for example, we can refresh offers on the fly on the page itself. When we drive people back to the native voucher code page that we build, we're able to actually refresh those offers based on what they've had in their basket previously. Similarly on the basket, that's also true. FMCG will catch up with retail. Unilever, for example, spend more than Tesco here in the UK. And you'll see that with brands across the globe as well. There are brands that have untapped budget, which they're willing to move into affiliate marketing. Traditionally, affiliate marketing has always been one of those acquisition channels, or people think it's just driven by deals. If you think about it, affiliate marketing really is a payment metric more than a channel. We have, as an industry, all of the other paid methods of driving traffic. We just do it on a performance metric. Certainly what we're seeing also is a rise of ethical rewards. Consumers are very savvy. If you just look at the rise within the younger generation with the fear towards things like climate change, for example, ethical rewards is a natural fit for those types of consumers. Brands like Tom's, for example, who are gifting shoes to poorer parts of the world, I think we'll see a real shift. In summary, just a few points that I wanted to make really before we open for questions. One, I think the brands that take on board these personalized techniques and actually understand that their consumers are expecting personalized deals, like the ASOSs, the Iconics, the Boohoo, they're the ones that are going to succeed. You know, the Iconics, for example, within Australia, they're the brands that are going to succeed, and they're the brands that are going to fight against the downfall of the high street, which we're seeing. Because at the moment, the high street isn't adapting. Number two, the high street does not adapt and understand that it needs to start driving or using data to attract its customers and create a different shopping experience, then they're going to really struggle. I really believe the brands that have their own goods, for example, are really going to start to push to drive customers direct. And that we need to be very wary that brands like Nike and Adidas, for example, are going to be trying to drive more footfall, not only in store, but also online. And if you look at things like Nike Labs, for example, through how they personalize goods for their customers in a really unique way, we're starting to see that massive shift. I just want to leave you with one final thought from Jeff Bezos. If you think about it, this is over 20 years old, and actually it's really prevalent today. I have 45 million customers. I don't just want one store, I want 45 million. If we're going to think about how we're going to fight against the likes of Amazon, who are personalizing and driving forward the immediacy that customers are expecting through delivery within the hour, we need to start taking on board that customers expect personalized deals in real time. I just want to thank everyone for listening to me today. I'm just going to hand back to Amanda.
Amazing. Thank you so much. We've definitely learned a lot.
Thanks for listening to this Flex Your Hustle Podinar. Give us a rate or review on your pod app when you have a moment, and make sure you hit follow so you don't miss any episodes. I'm Michelle Lomas. See you next time and keep hustling.
Commission Factory.